Vornis 7 was burning. The once thriving colony, home to millions under the Galactic Union's banner, was now a war zone. The skies were filled with smoke, fire, and the wreckage of fallen ships. Buildings crumbled as energy blasts tore through them. The people of Vornis 7 had fought bravely, but they had never stood a chance. The Zarkith Dominion had come with overwhelming force, an entire fleet of warships, each one designed for destruction. Their mission was clear: wipe out the colony and leave no survivors. Inside the command center, Governor Lyrian Velos stood with trembling hands, staring at the holo display. The last of the planetary defense turrets had been destroyed. The fleet that had once guarded them was nothing but wreckage floating in orbit. The enemy was already landing ground forces. "This is it," Lyrian whispered, voice hollow. The Union had abandoned them. For days, they had sent distress signals, pleas for help, begging for reinforcements. Every message had gone unanswered. The Union's high command had deemed Vornis 7 a lost cause. A military officer, Commander Relos, stepped forward. His uniform was scorched, his face bruised. "Governor, we need to evacuate the civilians underground. If we surrender, maybe." "There is no surrender," Lyrian interrupted. "The Zarkith don't take prisoners." They both knew the truth. This was the end. The enemy was closing in, wiping out any last resistance. There was nowhere left to run. The last call for help. Deep beneath the surface, in a dimly lit bunker, a young communications officer sat before a console. Her fingers trembled as she typed the final distress message. "If anyone is listening, this is our final stand." She hesitated for a moment before pressing send. The message shot into the void, a desperate cry into the silence of space. But silence was all that came back. Minutes passed, then an hour, then two. Nothing. The enemy commanders laughed as they bombarded the last city. A shadow in the void. And then something changed. A tremor ran through the air. The sensors in the control room flickered wildly. Officers scrambled to check their readings. The lead Zarkith warship, Dominance, halted its assault. Its captain, a monstrous being named Varkal, narrowed his reptilian eyes. "What is that?" one of his officers muttered. In the depths of space, past the wreckage of the Union's destroyed fleet, something massive was emerging from the darkness. A fleet. Not just any fleet. Human ships. Varkal's blood ran cold. The arrival of Earth's deadliest fleet. The first ship dropped out of hyperspace like a ghost, silent, massive, and armored like a fortress. Then another, and another. Dozens of them. Sleek, angular, designed for war. They bore no colors of the Galactic Union, no insignias of any known military faction. These ships belonged to Earth. Humanity had not been seen in major galactic wars for decades. Most species had assumed they had gone into isolation, that they had no interest in interstellar conflicts. They were wrong. The comms on Vornis 7 crackled to life. A single transmission broke through the static. A voice, calm, controlled, and unmistakably human, spoke 3 words. "Humanity has heard your call." Fear spreads among the enemy. For the first time, the Zarkith Dominion hesitated. Varkal's claws dug into the metal armrest of his command chair. He had fought countless battles, conquered dozens of planets. But never, never had he faced humans. Legends of Earth's war fleets whispered through the galaxy, merciless, unstoppable, relentless. Now those legends were real. The Zarkith fleet began scanning the incoming ships, searching for weaknesses. There were none. These were not the slow, predictable warships of the Union. These were predators. A single energy pulse shot out from one of the human vessels. Not an attack, just a warning. But the message was clear. The hunt had begun. The Zarkith Dominion had never known fear. For centuries, their fleets had spread terror across the galaxy, reducing entire civilizations to ash. They had fought against the Galactic Union, the Vrake Consortium, even the mighty Xilari warlords, and won every time. But now, as they watched the human fleet emerge from the void, something unfamiliar gripped them. Doubt. A silent arrival. The first human warship, the UNS Revenant, cut through the darkness like a phantom. Black-armored, bristling with weapons, its hull gleamed under the shattered light of Vornis 7's burning atmosphere. Then came another. And another. Ships too large for any known race. Too heavily armed for conventional warfare. They didn't arrive with the usual bravado of Galactic Union fleets. There was no warning. No negotiation. Only cold, methodical silence. The Zarkith officers aboard the Dominance scrambled to scan the new arrivals. Their computers struggled to analyze human warships. The readings were impossible. Their shielding, denser than any seen before. Their engines, too fast for their size. Their weapons, unknown and terrifyingly efficient. "Sir," one of the Zarkith tacticians spoke, his voice shaking. "These ships, they're absorbing our scans. They're countering our systems before we've even engaged them." Varkal, the Zarkith warlord, clenched his jaw. His spiked exoskeleton tensed as he stared at the holo display. "That's not possible," he growled. "No fleet can prepare for a battle before it begins." Yet the evidence was right in front of him. The humans had come prepared. The first shot. For a long moment, the battlefield was still. The human fleet hovered above Vornis 7, their formation impeccable, their silence unnerving. Then, without warning, a single railgun round was fired. From the UNS Revenant, a metal slug the size of a building tore through the void at near-light speed. It struck the Zarkith battleship Skralok before its shields even registered the impact. A heartbeat later, the Skralok exploded. Not a simple detonation, but a cataclysmic rupture. The kinetic energy alone ripped the ship in half, sending flaming debris spiraling through the Zarkith fleet. The other warships barely had time to react. "Whoa, what was that?" One of Varkal's officers stammered. Varkal's claws dug into his chair. That wasn't an energy weapon. It wasn't a plasma torpedo. It was something worse. "Railguns," he whispered, realization dawning. Mass strikers. Primitive by galactic standards. But in human hands, devastating. The battle begins. The Zarkith war fleet scrambled into action. Fighters launched from their carriers, swarming toward the human fleet like a tidal wave. But the humans were faster. Their point defense systems activated before the enemy pilots could even fire. Thousands of auto-tracking turrets swiveled, locking onto incoming targets with impossible precision. What happened next wasn't a dogfight. It was a massacre. The first wave of Zarkith fighters was wiped out before reaching human ships. Their wreckage rained down upon the burning colony below. The few that did break through found themselves hunted. Human ships didn't just defend. They anticipated. They outmaneuvered their enemies with a level of control that was inhuman. Inside one of the human command ships, Admiral Elias Voss watched the battle unfold. His expression was unreadable, his voice calm. "Phase 1 complete," he said. "Activate the wolves." The wolves of war. In the depths of the human fleet, a new wave of ships emerged, sleek, fast-moving, unlike the massive battleships before them. These were Earth's hunter-killers, dagger-like vessels that moved with terrifying precision. Instead of engaging in head-on assaults, they weaved between enemy formations, striking with surgical efficiency. One by one, the Zarkith cruisers fell. Varkal watched in horror as his unstoppable fleet turned into scattered wreckage. The humans weren't just winning. They were dissecting them. Ground-side hope. Meanwhile, on the surface of Vornis 7, the survivors of the colony watched in awe. The last remnants of their defense forces, hiding in underground bunkers, stared at their monitors in disbelief. For days, they had heard nothing but destruction. They had watched their home burn, knowing no one would come. But now they saw the impossible. A human fleet, something the galaxy had whispered about but never seen in full power, was crushing the Zarkith Dominion before their eyes. A young officer in the bunker whispered, almost afraid to believe it. "We're going to live." For the first time in weeks, hope returned to Vornis 7. The fear spreads. Back in space, the Zarkith fleet tried to retreat. But humanity had other plans. As the last of the enemy warships attempted to jump to hyperspace, their systems failed. Jamming signals flooded their frequencies. Their engines locked up. Admiral Voss leaned forward, watching the enemy squirm. "We never said you were allowed to leave," he muttered. And with that, the slaughter continued. The battlefield was no longer a war zone. It was a graveyard. Vornis 7's orbit, once dominated by the Zarkith Dominion, was now littered with the shattered remains of their once mighty fleet. Fires burned in the void, wreckage drifting aimlessly. The human fleet had arrived like a storm, tearing through the enemy lines with merciless precision. What was once an unstoppable invasion force had become a scattered, desperate retreat. And the humans weren't letting them escape. The desperation of the Zarkith. Aboard the Dominance, Warlord Varkal was losing control. His command ship was one of the few Zarkith warships still intact, but that wouldn't last. The humans weren't just attacking, they were hunting. One by one, the Zarkith ships that tried to flee were disabled or destroyed, their engines fried by electromagnetic pulses, their shields overloaded by relentless barrages. Varkal's second-in-command, Commander Axelroth, turned to him with wild eyes. "They've jammed our long-range communications. We can't call for reinforcements." Varkal's claws twitched. This was impossible. No one should have been able to counter their fleet like this. He slammed his fist against the console. "We need to break free. Order the fleet to scatter. Some of us must survive." Axelroth hesitated. "And what of the ground troops?" Varkal's expression hardened. They were already dead. "Leave them," he growled. "We can rebuild, but only if we live." The hunter becomes the prey. The surviving Zarkith warships broke formation, attempting to flee in multiple directions. Their engines flared as they pushed to their limits, trying to outrun the human fleet. But the humans had been expecting this. The UNS Revenant, Earth's flagship, transmitted a simple command: "Release the hounds." Across the fleet, hangar doors opened, and out came the Striker-class interceptors, sleek, black starships designed for one thing only: pursuit. They shot forward in perfect synchronization, their movements eerily precise. Zarkith ships tried to dodge, to shake them off. But the Strikers didn't just follow, they anticipated. It was as if the human pilots could see the future. One by one, the fleeing warships were caught and destroyed. A message of terror. On board the Dominance, Varkal watched his fleet die. His claws dug into the armrest of his chair, his breathing ragged. This isn't a war. This is an execution. Just then, his console beeped. A transmission was coming through, from the humans. His officers looked at him in shock. No demands had been made so far. No negotiations. Just silent, relentless destruction. "Put it through," he ordered. The holoscreen flickered, revealing the face of Admiral Elias Voss. The human was calm, his blue eyes piercing, his expression devoid of any emotion. "This is Admiral Voss of the Terran fleet," he said. His voice was steady, controlled, not arrogant, not cruel, just cold. "You invaded a world under our protection. That was a mistake." Varkal bared his fangs. "We have crushed the Galactic Union before. We will." Voss didn't blink. "This isn't the Union." The words hung in the air, heavier than any weapon. "You came here expecting a fair fight," Voss continued. "We don't do fair fights. We don't do diplomacy with butchers." He leaned forward. "We eradicate threats." Varkal felt something he had never felt before. True fear, the end of the Zarkith ground forces. While the battle in orbit was one-sided, the fight on the surface of Vornis 7 was still raging. The Zarkith ground troops had taken control of most of the colony. Their reptilian warriors had slaughtered countless civilians, their war machines leveling entire districts. They had won the planet, or so they thought. Then the humans arrived. High above, massive dropships detached from the human fleet, descending through the atmosphere like falling meteors. The Zarkith looked up, expecting a conventional landing. Inside a shattered Zarkith command post, Warlord Kordath bared his fangs at his remaining officers. He had conquered over a dozen planets. He had led the slaughter of billions. And now he was hiding. "We need to retreat," one of his captains growled. "If we make it to the dropships." "Retreat to where?" Kordath snarled, slamming his fist against the console. "Look around you. The humans have already taken orbit. We're trapped here." He turned to his tactical officer. "How many troops do we have left?" The officer hesitated before answering. "Less than 5,000. 5,000. Against a force of 10,000 orbital shock troopers, with air support, armored walkers, and precision drone strikes. This wasn't a battle. It was a culling." Kordath's claws flexed. He had two options: fight to the end or surrender. And the Zarkith never surrendered. He straightened, his eyes burning with rage. "Then we fight. Every last one of us." The officers nodded, but their silence told him the truth. They all knew how this would end. The wrath of the orbital shock troopers. Across the ruined capital city of Vornis 7, the final battle erupted. The last remnants of the Zarkith forces dug in, using debris and abandoned vehicles as makeshift barricades. But it didn't matter. Because the humans weren't just coming for them. They were already here. From the shadows, the orbital shock troopers moved like specters of death, their black exosuits blending into the ruins. Zarkith soldiers fired wildly into the darkness, only to be silenced by precise headshots a second later. Explosions rocked the streets as human artillery targeted enemy strongholds. Zarkith mechs, towering machines of war, attempted to counterattack, only to be hacked mid-combat, turned against their own troops. For every one human that fell, 10 Zarkith warriors died. The streets ran red with their blood. The fall of Warlord Kordath. Deep in his last command bunker, Kordath could hear the screams of his warriors. The humans weren't taking prisoners. He turned to his last remaining officer. "How many still stand?" The officer swallowed hard. "Maybe 200. Kordath exhaled. He had once led entire armadas, conquered entire worlds. And now, he had 200 warriors. The door behind them exploded inward. A group of black-armored soldiers entered. Their leader stepped forward, his helmet retracting to reveal the face of Captain Elias Ward. Kordath snarled. "Human." Ward tilted his head. "Warlord Kordath." He looked around the bunker. "Impressive empire you built." Kordath knew what was coming. He raised his claws. "You will not take me alive." Ward's eyes were cold. "I wasn't planning to." A single shot rang out. Kordath fell. And with him, the Zarkith Dominion died. A war that would never be forgotten. Hours later, the battlefield fell silent. The last Zarkith soldier had been executed. The last Zarkith warship had been destroyed. And Vornis 7 was free. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. The humans had come, and they had left nothing but ruins behind. A message to the Galactic Union. As the dust settled, a final transmission was sent to the Galactic Union leadership. The face of Admiral Elias Voss filled the screen. His voice was calm, but his words were anything but. "The Galactic Union abandoned Vornis 7. The Zarkith came, and you did nothing." He leaned forward, his blue eyes cold. "We are not the Galactic Union. We do not abandon our own." His next words sent a chill through the highest-ranking officials in the galaxy. "You left this colony to perish. Earth did not." Then the transmission cut to black. The aftermath. The battle for Vornis 7 was over. But the war was just beginning. Across the stars, the Zarkith Dominion was no more. Their empire once thought invincible, had been eradicated in a single battle. The Galactic Union, once dismissive of humanity, now watched with fear. Because they knew the truth. If humanity declared war, no one would survive. And deep in the shadows of the galaxy, new enemies watched. Some sought revenge. Others sought alliances. But they all understood one thing. Earth was not to be underestimated. Earth was not to be challenged. And most of all, Earth was not to be provoked. The fires on Vornis 7 still smoldered, but the battle was over. The last of the Zarkith Dominion had been wiped from the surface. Their fleet was gone. Their armies were dead. Their warlord, Kordath, lay in the rubble of his command post, his reign ended by a single human bullet. But while the battlefield was silent, the galaxy was not. The Galactic Union reacts. Across the stars, the Galactic Union had watched the battle unfold with growing dread. In the massive chambers of the Union High Council, representatives of hundreds of species sat in stunned silence. The footage played before them, again and again. Zarkith warships torn apart by kinetic rounds. Human warships moving like predators through a herd of prey. Shock troopers erasing entire battalions in mere minutes. It had been less of a battle and more of a slaughter. A reptilian diplomat from the Sci-Fi Republic hissed in alarm. They didn't just defeat the Zarkith. He gestured to the footage. They erased them. Auxiliary General, his tentacles twitching, spoke next. There are no Zarkith survivors. None. That means only one thing. The chamber fell silent as the words settled in. The humans had made a statement. And that statement was, "This is what happens to those who prey on our people." The Union's secret meeting. A smaller, more private meeting took place in a hidden chamber within the Union headquarters. Only the highest-ranking military and political leaders were allowed in. Seated at the table was High Chancellor Varrock, the leader of the Galactic Union. His long-fingered hands were clasped tightly together. Beside him, Admiral Tsilon of the Galactic Fleet studied a holomap of the battle. "This is a problem," the Admiral said. The Chancellor exhaled. "We have debated for years whether the humans were a threat. This answers that question." The holo footage changed, displaying Admiral Elias Voss's final message. "We do not abandon our own." The words hung in the air like an executioner's blade. A cold silence followed. Finally, Counselor Immunit of the Valerian Confederacy spoke. "The humans are dangerous, but there is another problem." The others turned to her. She narrowed her violet eyes. "The Zarkith Dominion is gone." A murmur spread through the room as the reality sank in. The Zarkith had ruled through fear and brutality. They had invaded, pillaged, and subjugated for decades. But they had also kept other threats in check. With the Zarkith destroyed, a power vacuum was forming. And that meant only one thing. Other predators would rise to take their place. The shadow of the Syndicate. Across the stars, in the lawless fringes of the galaxy, another force watched the destruction of the Zarkith with interest. Deep within a hidden fortress on Farron Prime, the Oblivion Syndicate, a coalition of warlords, mercenaries, and criminal empires, gathered in secret. At the head of the table sat Overlord Xyros, a towering, cybernetically enhanced Turvax with blood-red eyes. His voice was a guttural growl as he watched footage of the battle. "The humans have power, but they lack control." He gestured to the ruined world of Vornis 7. "They fight with rage, with emotion." A scared Batarian mercenary sneered. "They think they're untouchable." Thyros leaned forward, his metal-clawed fingers tapping against the table. "Then perhaps it is time we show them that even Earth can bleed." A chilling silence filled the room. The Syndicate did not fight wars. They waged chaos. If they moved against humanity, it would not be with fleets or armies. It would be with assassins, with sabotage, with terror, and Earth would never see it coming. The humans prepare. Back on Vornis 7, the survivors of the colony emerged from the ruins. They had been left to die, but humanity had answered their call. Now, As they looked to the sky, watching the massive warships of Earth's fleet hang in orbit like silent guardians, they understood the truth. They would never be abandoned again. In the command center of the UNS Revenant, Admiral Elias Voss stood before a holomap of the galaxy. His officers waited for orders. One of them, Commander Rena Carter, spoke first. "We sent a message today, sir." Voss nodded. "Yes, but now we wait for the response." Because he knew it was coming. The Galactic Union feared them. The criminals of the galaxy hated them. And in the dark corners of space, enemies were already gathering. They had won this battle. But the real war was just beginning. The war against the Zarkith Dominion was over. Vornis 7 had been saved. But peace was an illusion. Because while the Galactic Union watched humanity with growing fear, something far worse lurked in the shadows. The Oblivion Syndicate, the most ruthless crime empire in the known galaxy, had set its sights on Earth. And their war would not be fought with fleets. It would be fought in the darkness. The Syndicate strikes. Deep in the lawless sector of Farron Prime, Overlord Zyros sat at the heart of his vast empire. Before him, a dozen warlords, assassins, and spies waited for his command. The air in the chamber was thick with smoke and shadows. A hologram flickered to life, a projection of Earth's feared fleet. Zyros studied it for a moment before speaking. "The humans think they are untouchable." His voice was deep and mechanical, distorted by the cybernetic implants running along his throat. "They strike with brute force. They overwhelm. They annihilate." His red eyes flickered. But strength means nothing if you cannot see the blade before it strikes. A hooded figure stepped forward. Agent Sarthis, master of subterfuge. "Their weakness is their pride, Overlord," he said. "They expect war to come in the form of fleets. But war can be much quieter." Zyros leaned forward, metal claws tapping against the table. "Then it is time." His voice dropped into a growl. Asterisk, send the assassins. Send the saboteurs. Let them feel fear, not fire. Make the mighty fleet of Earth bleed. The war had begun, and humanity didn't even know it yet. Terror in the stars. It started with a single explosion. A United Earth diplomatic vessel, the UEN's Horizon, vanished in a fireball over the planet Draco's IV. The Galactic Union called it an accident. The humans knew better. Then came the next strike. On a military outpost in the Vega system, an entire squad of Earth's elite shock troopers was found dead, their bodies untouched, their faces frozen in expressions of pure terror. Sensors detected no weapons fire, no breaches, no survivors. Just whispers. Then, the Syndicate made their message clear. A single transmission was sent to Admiral Elias Voss aboard the UNS Revenant. The message contained only 3 words. "Your turn next." The search for the killers. The meeting room aboard the UNS Revenant was silent. The holoscreen flickered, replaying the footage of the Horizon's destruction for the 4th time. Commander Rena Carter clenched her fists. This wasn't random. Beside her, Captain Darius Kane narrowed his eyes. "Someone's hunting us." Admiral Voss remained still, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Vega. "We need names, we need locations, and we need them now." Vega hesitated. "Sir, our enemies aren't an empire. They have no borders, no fleets." He exhaled. "This is the Oblivion Syndicate. We're not fighting a war. We're fighting ghosts." The room fell silent, until Voss spoke again. "Then we make the ghosts bleed, hunting the hunters." The Syndicate had underestimated humanity. They thought they could strike from the shadows and remain unseen. But Earth's fleet had never fought fair, and they weren't about to start now. Across the stars, a new kind of war began. A war of assassins and spies. A war fought in the streets of criminal worlds and the dark corridors of Union space stations. The humans sent their own killers, their own saboteurs, their own monsters, and they had one mission: find the Syndicate, burn them to the ground. The Syndicate's fatal mistake. Iros had expected fear. He had expected retaliation. What he had not expected was human vengeance. His network of informants began to vanish. His bases in 3 systems went silent. Then his personal assassin, Sarthis, disappeared. One night, in his private fortress, a message was carved into his chamber door. A warning, a promise. We see you now. For the first time in his long, ruthless career, Tyros felt fear. The humans had found him, and they were coming. The darkness that had been creeping closer to Earth was now at the doorstep. The Oblivion Syndicate, a force born from shadows and deception, had underestimated humanity. And now the human fleet was on the hunt, ready to end the Syndicate's reign of terror. It wasn't just a battle for control or power, it was a battle for survival. The fate of the galaxy was about to be decided, and it would all come down to one final confrontation. The chase begins. High above Earth, the UNS Revenant drifted silently, its hull a shadow against the stars. Inside, the crew prepared for what was to come. Admiral Elias Voss stood on the bridge, staring at the vastness of space before him. The enemy had always struck without warning, hidden in plain sight, moving with a speed and precision that left no room for error. But the humans had learned from their mistakes. Admiral Voss knew that the Syndicate was hiding somewhere in the shadows of the galaxy, but now their time was running out. They had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's resolve. "Commander Carter," Voss spoke, his voice calm but filled with steel. "Prepare the fleet. We're going in. We're taking the fight to them." Carter gave a firm nod. She knew what was at stake. The Syndicate had taken lives, shattered worlds, and left a trail of destruction. Now it was time to bring that destruction to an end. "The hunters will become the hunted," Carter whispered to herself. Syndicate in the shadows. Far from Earth, deep in the Oblivion Syndicate's last stronghold, Cyros, the cold and calculating leader of the Syndicate, watched as the humans closed in on them. His fortress on Farron Prime was designed to be a place of absolute secrecy, a sanctuary hidden from the galaxy. But no place was safe anymore. Cyros had been known to strike fear into the hearts of his enemies, his name whispered in every corner of the galaxy. He had taken on the galaxy's fiercest factions and destroyed them. But now, standing before his war table, he could feel a shift in the air. The humans had come, and they were not afraid. Cyros tapped his metal fingers against the table. "They have found us, but we will not go quietly." He turned to his council of warlords, assassins, and spies. "Prepare the fleet. It is time to send a message of our own." But as his words filled the room, a quiet buzz echoed through his private chamber. A report came in, and Cyros's eyes narrowed as he read the message. "Human warships are closing in on our position. The hunt begins now." It was too late for the Syndicate. They had pushed too far. The humans had learned how to fight their kind, how to fight dirty, and the galaxy would never be the same. The final showdown. The Revenant led the charge, its engines flaring as it shot through the cold vastness of space, flanked by a fleet of human warships. Behind them, hundreds of support ships, specialized forces, and elite strike teams moved like shadows through the darkened corridors of space. The Syndicate had no idea what was about to hit them. As they reached the outskirts of Farron Prime, the fleet came to a halt, spread out in a perfect formation. The massive flagship UNS Revenant, sleek and imposing, sat in the center, its weapons bristling with deadly intent. Admiral Voss's voice echoed through the bridge of the Revenant as he gave the final command. "Initiate Phase 1. No survivors. We end this now." The attack began. The first wave of human fighters, led by Captain Kane, plunged into the Syndicate's defenses. They struck with incredible precision, disabling enemy ships with surgical strikes, cutting through them like a hot knife through butter. The Syndicate, unprepared for the speed and efficiency of the humans, scrambled to retaliate. But it was too late. The humans had already established their foothold. The battle rages. For hours, the battle raged across space, ship against ship, human ingenuity against syndicate brutality. Each strike was more brutal than the last, each ship exploding in a brilliant fireball of energy and debris. The syndicate, once feared across the galaxy, was being torn apart, piece by piece. But in the heart of the battle, Cyros had one final ace up his sleeve. He activated the final weapon, a devastating energy cannon capable of obliterating entire fleets in one shot. From the heart of his fortress, the massive beam shot toward the human fleet. The humans had not expected this, but they had a secret of their own. At the last moment, the UNS Revenant, under Voss's command, executed a daring maneuver. The Revenant's deflector shields flared to life, absorbing the brunt of the blast, the ship shaking from the force. "We're still standing," Voss said with a smirk, watching the Syndicate's last hope evaporate. The fall of the Syndicate. With their final weapon destroyed and their fleet in shambles, the Oblivion Syndicate was on the brink of collapse. The humans had struck at the heart of their power, and there was no escaping the wrath of Earth's might. Cyros, his face twisted in rage and disbelief, gave one last order to his remaining forces. Retreat. But it was already too late. The Syndicate was no more. With their last stronghold destroyed and their leaders dead, the remnants of the Oblivion Syndicate were scattered to the winds. Their reign of terror had come to an end. The aftermath. The battle was over. The galaxy was still, the silence of victory settling in like a thick fog. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity had won. The Revenant returned to Earth as heroes. Its crew celebrated as champions. But for Admiral Voss, the victory felt bittersweet. The Syndicate was gone, but the war was far from over. The galaxy would not forget what had happened. The humans had made their mark, and that mark would forever change the fate of the stars. "This is just the beginning," Voss muttered to himself, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. And in the dark corners of the galaxy, other threats watched and waited. But humanity had shown the galaxy one undeniable truth. Earth would never be a target again. As the last remnants of the Oblivion Syndicate scattered into the far reaches of the galaxy, the human fleet returned to Earth, their victory not just over an enemy, but over an ideology that had long threatened the galaxy's peace. The warships that once blazed across the stars now cruised silently back to their home, their crews exhausted but triumphant. On Earth, the skies were calm. The world that had once been a forgotten speck in the vast expanse of the galaxy now held a different significance. Earth had been the unlikeliest of players, a world once thought weak, now emerging as a force to be reckoned with. Admiral Elias Voss stood on the balcony of the UNS Revenant's command center, gazing out across the city. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow across the landscape. It was a new dawn, not just for Earth, but for the galaxy. Voss's thoughts lingered on the battle, on the cost of war. For all the lives lost and sacrifices made, there was something profound in knowing that humanity had not only survived, but had emerged as a defender of the galaxy. As he turned back to face his crew, Commander Carter walked up beside him. There was a quiet understanding between them. Victory was sweet, but the journey ahead was long. "We've made our mark, Elias," Carter said, her eyes scanning the horizon. "But it's only the beginning. There will be more challenges ahead." Voss nodded, his face set with determination. "Yes, but we're ready. Humanity is no longer just a small corner of the galaxy. We've proven that we can stand with the best, and we will continue to protect what's ours." As they looked out into the vast expanse of space, a transmission pinged across their communication channels. It was a simple message, but it carried weight. "This is the Galactic Council. We acknowledge your victory. The galaxy now recognizes Earth as a force to be reckoned with. We seek an alliance." Voss smiled, his voice firm as he responded. Humanity accepts and will be watching. The message ended, leaving a brief silence. The winds of change were blowing, and humanity would no longer be on the receiving end. They would lead. And as the camera zoomed out, showing the sprawling Earth beneath them, the message was clear. The stars had just begun to feel the weight of Earth's resolve. The Earth was not prepared for the alien diplomats' arrival. The hum of the bustling city streets paused as the sky darkened. The massive ship slowly descended, casting a shadow over the crowd below. People stopped in their tracks, staring in awe at the sleek, metallic vessel. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The world's leaders were alerted immediately. The Galactic Council had sent their emissary, and no one knew what to expect. The alien diplomat, a tall figure with shimmering blue skin and eyes that glowed like stars, stepped out of the ship. His clothing, a blend of silver and white, seemed to shift and ripple with each movement. The people around the ship fell silent, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. This was no ordinary visit. The aliens weren't here to make peace. They were here to ask questions. But there was one question that would change everything. The diplomat walked with a purposeful stride toward the awaiting human representatives. They had been briefed. They knew this moment was coming, yet none of them felt ready. How could they? For years, humans had been isolated from the rest of the galaxy, developing their own technologies, their own ways of life. Now, faced with this powerful alien race, the question lingered in everyone's mind. Why had the Galactic Council come to Earth? The diplomat's voice, calm and commanding, echoed through the air as he addressed the gathering crowd. "I have come to ask a simple question," he began, his tone neutral, yet carrying an edge of authority. "Why are humans so armed?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud, unsettling the human representatives. The words took everyone by surprise. The room was filled with murmurs, confused glances exchanged between leaders. Why would he ask such a thing? Why were they so armed? The question seemed almost absurd. Humans had always been known for their preparedness, their resilience. It was true that Earth had an impressive military force, a vast arsenal of weapons, and advanced technologies. But no one had ever thought to ask why. No one had ever questioned it. Until now. The diplomat's eyes scanned the room, his gaze settling on a man standing at the front. He was the leader of Earth's defense forces, a decorated general with years of experience in handling threats. The diplomat's next words were directed at him. "What makes you so afraid?" he asked, his voice softer now, but still carrying an undeniable weight. The question struck the general like a physical blow. He could feel the weight of the alien's gaze piercing through him. It was as though the diplomat saw through every shield, every weapon, every defense humanity had built. The general hesitated, unsure of how to answer. How could he explain to an alien race that had never faced the same dangers humans had, that had never experienced the brutality of survival on a planet where everything could change in an instant? Earth had been through countless wars, catastrophic natural disasters, and internal struggles. Humanity had learned the hard way that peace could vanish in the blink of an eye. And so, they had armed themselves, built powerful defenses, and prepared for whatever threat might come next. But could he say that to this alien? Could he make them understand? A murmur rippled through the crowd as the general stepped forward, his voice steady but tinged with the weight of history. "It's not about fear," he said, his words measured. "It's about survival. We've had to fight for everything we have. We've learned that peace is fragile, that safety is never guaranteed." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "We've seen what happens when people, or species, fail to prepare. When they let their guard down." The diplomat tilted his head slightly, his glowing eyes narrowing as he processed the answer. It wasn't what he had expected. He had assumed that humans, with their vast military power, were simply preparing for a war, perhaps against other alien species, or even against the galaxy itself. But the response he had received was different. It wasn't about aggression. It was about survival, about the human instinct to protect what they had built. But why did humans feel the need to protect themselves so fiercely? The diplomat looked back at the sky, his mind racing. There were rumors in the galaxy, whispers about humanity's strange behavior. The stories told of Earth's incredible resilience, of how they had survived every attack, every catastrophe. But no one had ever stopped to consider why. The answer, it seemed, was far more complex than he had anticipated. "You are prepared for war," the diplomat said slowly, as if testing the words in his mind. "But you are not at war. Why then do you need such power?" His tone was laced with both curiosity and confusion. The diplomat couldn't understand. In his culture, the idea of preparing for war without the intention to fight was foreign. It didn't make sense. The general looked up at him, his expression hardening. "We don't seek war," he said firmly. "We seek peace, but we understand that peace is fragile. The universe is full of dangers. Some we understand, some we don't. We've learned that in order to keep peace, we must be ready to fight for it." The diplomat's mind raced. He had come to Earth expecting to find a war-hungry species, one eager to conquer and expand. Instead, he found something far more unsettling, an entire civilization that had learned the hard way that peace was not a given. They had armed themselves, not to attack, but to survive. And now this question burned in his mind. If humans were so well prepared, what were they preparing for? The diplomat's thoughts were interrupted by the general's next words. "We are not just armed for the future of Earth. We are armed because we know what could be out there, beyond our world." The general's eyes darkened as he spoke. "There are threats we have yet to understand, and we will not be caught unprepared again." The diplomat took a step back, his mind reeling. What was the general trying to say? Were humans truly preparing for something unknown? Something far more dangerous than they had ever faced before? And if so, what did that mean for the galaxy? The silence in the room grew heavy as the diplomat considered this new information. He had assumed Earth's military buildup was a sign of aggression. But now, it seemed like a desperate plea for survival. The question that had been posed to him, "Why are humans so armed?" now had an answer, but it was an answer that left him with more questions than ever. As he looked out over the crowd, the diplomat could feel the weight of humanity's history pressing down on him. They had been through wars, betrayals, and losses. But they had survived. They had learned to adapt, to fight, to protect what was theirs. And now, the diplomat was left wondering, was humanity's strength a threat, or was it the very thing that would save them from the unknown dangers lurking in the vastness of space? The answer was still unclear, but one thing was certain. Earth was not a species to be underestimated, and the diplomat knew that this visit, this question, would change everything. The alien diplomat stood still for a moment, processing the general's words. A strange sense of unease settled in his chest, the weight of this conversation slowly beginning to sink in. The human leaders around him exchanged uneasy glances, waiting for the diplomat's response. No one could have predicted the way this meeting would unfold. It wasn't a negotiation, nor was it an alliance that had been requested. This was an inquiry into the heart of humanity's very existence, and for the first time, the diplomat felt that perhaps Earth was not the simple, defenseless species the Galactic Council had thought it was. The diplomat's glowing eyes flickered as he tilted his head, carefully choosing his next words. "Survival," he repeated softly, as if testing the word against his own understanding of it. He glanced at the fleet of ships visible through the transparent walls of the building. Their presence was a constant reminder of the power the alien civilization possessed, but something had changed. The confidence that had marked their arrival was now tinged with doubt. "We have all the power we need," the diplomat said, his voice a little firmer now. "Yet you fear the unknown so greatly that you build weapons for something that may never come." He seemed almost incredulous, but there was a curiosity buried beneath his words. Why prepare for an enemy that doesn't exist? The general's gaze sharpened. "You don't understand," he said, his voice steady but intense. "We don't prepare for what is right in front of us. We prepare for what could be lurking in the shadows. For all we know, there's a force out there far beyond our comprehension, one that has already set its sights on us. We don't know what's coming, but we know that, in the vastness of the universe, anything is possible." The diplomat considered this for a long moment, his mind racing. Humanity's worldview, their very way of thinking, was so fundamentally different from that of his own people. Where the alien civilization saw peace as a certainty, a given for any advanced species, humanity seemed to believe that peace could only be preserved through constant vigilance, constant readiness. It was a perspective the diplomat had never encountered before, and one that intrigued him more than he cared to admit. "The universe is a dangerous place," the general continued, his voice now filled with conviction. "You may not know it, but there are species out there that have destroyed entire civilizations for nothing more than sport. There are horrors we cannot even begin to imagine, forces that exist beyond the scope of your knowledge." His gaze darkened, and his voice dropped to a quiet growl. "We will not be caught unprepared again." The diplomat's mind was reeling. The words, "We will not be caught unprepared again," echoed in his mind like a thunderclap. Earth had learned a brutal lesson, the kind of lesson that shaped not just their history, but their entire philosophy of survival. The question now was whether this caution, this readiness to fight, was a strength or a weakness. If humanity was so determined to fight for survival, did that mean they were always on the edge of war? Were they so far removed from peace that they could never return? He didn't know, but he was beginning to understand why humans had built the forces they had. They didn't create weapons and armies just because they could. They created them because they had to. The diplomat turned away from the general, stepping toward the large windows that overlooked the city. The skyline of Earth was filled with towering structures, symbols of human achievement, of their strength. And yet, it wasn't their buildings or their technology that made the diplomat pause. It was the uncertainty in the air. The knowledge that these people had built everything they had to protect themselves, but at the same time, they feared the very future they had shaped. His thoughts were interrupted as a sudden wave of static buzzed through the room. The general's communicator beeped, and the urgency in his eyes was unmistakable. He picked it up, his face hardening as he listened to the message. The diplomat could see the change in the man's expression. Something was happening, something outside the walls of their carefully controlled meeting. The general turned to face him, his posture stiff. "We've just received new intelligence," the general said, his voice grim. "A fleet has been spotted near the edge of our solar system. Unknown ships, no signals, no communication." The diplomat's heart skipped a beat. He had been trained to handle situations like this, to assess threats to his people, but this was something else entirely. Humanity was facing the unknown. And for once, he realized that the alien council's assumptions about Earth might be flawed. The general's eyes narrowed. "We need to move now. It could be a threat, or it could be something we don't fully understand yet. But we can't take chances." The diplomat was struck by the calmness in the general's voice. The humans weren't panicking. They weren't scrambling for answers. They were acting, moving with purpose. In the diplomat's experience, this was the first sign of a species that had learned to survive not just against known threats, but against the unknown as well. His instincts told him that this wasn't just a display of strength. It was a display of survival. "What do you need from us?" the diplomat asked, the question slipping out before he could think twice. The general looked him in the eye, his expression unreadable. "Information, cooperation, and understanding. But most of all, we need to prepare for whatever is coming." The words struck the diplomat with the force of a revelation. Humans had always been at the edges of the galaxy's understanding, isolated, misunderstood, even feared. But now, the diplomat saw something else in them. They weren't just a young, fragile species fumbling through their first moments of galactic exposure. They were a species that had learned, perhaps better than anyone else, what it meant to survive. And now, They were about to prove it. As the meeting continued, the diplomat couldn't help but think of the question he had asked earlier. Why are humans so armed? He had asked it out of curiosity, out of a desire to understand. But now he realized that the true answer was much deeper than he could have imagined. Humanity had armed itself, not because it was preparing to conquer or destroy, but because it knew the galaxy was full of dangers they couldn't yet comprehend. And in that moment, the diplomat understood. The answer to his question was not a simple one. It was a lesson, a warning for any species that thought they could take humanity lightly. Because, as the diplomat soon discovered, when humans were faced with a threat, they didn't hesitate. They acted. And in that action, they became something no one, not even the most powerful of alien races, could ignore. The diplomat turned back toward the general, ready to begin their next steps. He no longer saw them as a species to be underestimated. He saw them as a force to be reckoned with, and the realization sent a shiver down his spine. The hum of the conference room faded into the background as the diplomat tried to process everything that had been said. His mind raced, caught between curiosity and uncertainty. The humans were nothing like the peaceful, advanced civilizations he had known throughout his travels. They were something else, something much more complex. But the one thing that stood out above all else was their willingness to confront the unknown, to face danger head-on with a resolve that even the most powerful of his people would struggle to match. The general's voice broke his train of thought. "The fleet could be hostile," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Or it could be something entirely different. Either way, we can't ignore it. This is a test for us all." The diplomat turned to look at the general, whose eyes betrayed no emotion. He was, in many ways, the perfect representation of human strength, calm under pressure, driven by a sense of purpose. The diplomat had seen his kind before, leaders who could inspire and guide their people through the darkest of times. But there was something different about humans. They didn't just react to threats. They anticipated them. They prepared for them, built defenses against them, not because they were born from weakness, but because they had learned from past mistakes. "Tell me, General," the diplomat said, his voice soft but curious. "Why have you not sought peace with the galaxy's other powers? Why do you insist on arming yourselves so heavily?" The general turned his gaze toward the diplomat, his expression unreadable. He seemed to weigh the question carefully before responding. "We have tried. But peace isn't something you can simply ask for, especially when your enemies don't see value in it. There are civilizations out there that see strength as the only way to survive, and they take what they want without mercy." He paused, his eyes darkening. "The truth is, we can't afford to trust anyone but ourselves. We've learned the hard way that when we don't prepare for the worst comes knocking on our door." The diplomat absorbed this, his mind racing. He had been taught to believe that peaceful coexistence was the only path forward, that no civilization should need to prepare for war, especially one that had reached the level of advancement humanity had. But now, faced with the reality of their situation, he was beginning to see the truth in the general's words. It wasn't that humanity sought war, he realized. They sought survival. And to survive in this vast, uncertain galaxy, they had learned to fight. Not out of hatred, but out of necessity. The diplomat felt a shift in his perspective, a dawning realization that humanity's strength didn't lie in their weapons alone. It lay in their unwavering determination, their refusal to be cowed by fear or uncertainty. The general's voice interrupted his thoughts. "We'll need to mobilize our forces immediately," he said, his tone becoming more urgent. "The fleet could be at the edge of our system within hours. We can't afford to waste time." The diplomat nodded, his mind now focused on the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a political maneuver or a test of strength. It was a matter of survival. Humanity's very future was at stake, and for the first time, the diplomat truly understood why they had armed themselves to the teeth. "We will help," he said, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding in his chest. "But you must understand, General. Our people have never faced anything like this. We have no idea what these ships might be, what they might want. The general's eyes flickered with something close to empathy. We don't either, but we're going to find out. The diplomat watched as the general turned to the command center, the urgency in his steps unmistakable. In that moment, the diplomat knew that whatever lay ahead, humanity would not face it alone. They had allies, and their resilience was something that would resonate across the stars. He followed the general into the command room, where screens flashed with data, and technicians worked furiously to monitor every movement of the unknown fleet. The tension in the room was palpable as they all waited for the next piece of information that would tell them what, exactly, they were up against. The diplomat stepped to the side, observing the humans as they worked. He had seen countless alien species and their methods of operation, but nothing quite like this. The humans were organized, efficient, and calm under pressure. There was no panic, no chaos, just the focused energy of a species determined to protect their home, no matter what it took. The silence in the room was thick, almost suffocating. Every eye in the command center was glued to the screens, watching the data flood in from the approaching fleet. Tensions were high, but what struck the diplomat most was the calm that seemed to fill the humans around him. Despite the dire situation, there was a certain peace about them, an unshakable resolve that emanated from their very being. They didn't panic. They didn't falter. They moved forward with determination. General Harris stood tall at the front of the room, his posture unwavering as he examined the incoming data. His team of officers worked quickly, analyzing the movements of the X-Terry fleet with precision. Every so often, a communication would come through, a cryptic message or a new piece of information, but the humans were ready. They had been expecting this moment for years. It was clear now. No matter how advanced the alien fleets might be, no one could prepare for humanity's defiance. As the diplomat observed, he couldn't help but wonder how many of the people in this room had experienced true war, how many had been forced to survive in a galaxy full of hostile species. He'd heard the stories, of course, the wars on Earth, the conflicts that had shaped human history. But to see it up close, to witness their ability to stand firm in the face of annihilation, was something else entirely. The fleet is now within range. A voice called out from across the room, snapping the diplomat from his thoughts. General Harris didn't miss a beat. "Get ready for interception," he ordered. "If they want to fight, we'll give them one. No retreat." The diplomat's heart pounded as he watched the humans in motion. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. The fleet that humanity had built over the years was not the largest in the galaxy, nor the most technologically advanced, but it was something far more important, cohesive. Each ship in the fleet was a part of a whole, each crew member an integral piece of the puzzle. Humanity had learned long ago that survival didn't come from overwhelming force. It came from unity and strategy. The X-Terry fleet, on the other hand, seemed to be a juggernaut of destruction. Large and powerful, with their ships gleaming menacingly in the void of space, they represented everything the diplomat had feared about the galaxy. In comparison, humanity's ships appeared small and unremarkable, but the general knew better than anyone else. The human fleet might not have been massive, but it was built for one thing: survival. And they would fight with everything they had. Suddenly, the diplomat's gaze was drawn to the massive screen at the front of the room. The X-Terry ships had stopped. A moment of eerie silence stretched between them, as if both sides were sizing each other up, determining their next move. The X-Terry fleet's leader, Captain Thal, had once again made contact. His voice crackled through the speaker system, deep and cold. "General Harris, this is your final warning. Stand down or face the consequences." The general didn't even flinch. "This is Earth's final defense, Captain Thal," he replied, his voice unwavering. "We are not afraid of you. Come and take what you think you can claim." The diplomat could feel the weight of the words hanging in the air. The threat was undeniable, yet the humans stood firm. He had heard of many races that could match the X-Terry in sheer power, but none of them had the same tenacity. the same fire that burned in humanity's heart. For the first time, the diplomat truly grasped what made humans so different. They didn't fight because they were warriors. They fought because they believed in something more, something worth defending. Their homes, their families, their very way of life. And that was something the X-Terry could never understand, no matter how many worlds they conquered. Another voice interrupted the tense silence. "The first wave is incoming," one of the officers reported. They'd deployed a fleet of drones, preparing for a heavy assault. General Harris took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing as he prepared for the battle. "Lock weapon systems. We need to make a statement here. This is not just about protecting Earth. This is about sending a message to the galaxy. We will not be cowed. We will not fall." The diplomat watched in awe as the room sprang into action. Ships moved in perfect synchronization, their weapons primed and ready. The tension was palpable. The battle was moments away. As the first wave of drones launched toward Earth's fleet, the diplomat couldn't help but think back to his earlier question. Why were humans so armed? It wasn't just to protect themselves. It was to show that no matter how many times they were pushed to the edge, they would always rise. They would always fight. And now, they would fight like never before. The X-Terry fleet's drones came into view, their sleek forms racing toward humanity's defensive line with terrifying speed. But the humans were ready. As the first wave of drones entered the kill zone, a series of bright flashes lit up the darkness of space as weapons fired from every ship in the fleet. Missiles streaked through the void, lasers shot across the expanse, and explosions erupted in the distance. The human ships maneuvered with precision, evading incoming fire while retaliating with devastating force. The diplomat stood at the back of the room, his heart racing as he watched the battle unfold. The human fleet wasn't just holding its ground. It was pushing back, forcing the X-Terry to rethink their entire strategy. Every shot fired, every move made, was a testament to humanity's resolve. The diplomat couldn't deny the power of their will, the strength they drew from their unity and determination. The X-Terry, once so confident in their superiority, were beginning to falter. Their drones, once so numerous, were being whittled down by the unyielding defense of humanity's fleet. But even in the face of mounting losses, the X-Terry captain remained steadfast. "This is not over," Captain Thal's voice rang out, filled with anger and disbelief. "You have no idea what you're up against, humans. We will break you." The diplomat's mind raced as he considered the words. The X-Terry had underestimated humanity, and they were paying the price for it. It wasn't just that humans fought to survive. They fought for something greater, something the X-Terry could never understand. And as the battle raged on, it became increasingly clear that this fight would not be decided by firepower alone. It would be decided by will, by heart, by the strength that humanity had found in the face of overwhelming odds. The diplomat stood back and watched, his respect for these people growing with each passing moment. The battle was far from over, but he now understood one undeniable truth. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated, and the galaxy would soon learn that lesson the hard way. The hum of the command center's systems filled the air as the battle escalated outside, but inside there was a strange stillness. General Harris stood at the front, staring at the data on the screen. His expression was one of focus, but his mind was far away, racing through strategies and contingencies. The X-Terry had underestimated Earth. They had thought they could simply waltz in, demand Earth's submission, and walk away with their prize. But they had made a grave mistake. Humanity wasn't just fighting to defend their home. They were fighting for something far greater. A new era was dawning, one in which no one would dare challenge them again. The diplomat, standing in the back of the room, could see the fire in the human's eyes. It was not anger or rage. It was something deeper. It was a conviction born from years of struggle, survival, and triumph. "General," one of the officers called, snapping the diplomat from his thoughts. "We've lost another cruiser, but we've taken down a few more of their drones. The X-Terri are starting to retreat. Harris nodded grimly, not allowing himself to show any signs of relief. Don't let up. If they retreat, we pursue. We need to make sure they understand that humanity is not a force to be trifled with. We will not give them the luxury of retreat. The diplomat, still processing the carnage unfolding outside, felt a surge of admiration for the humans. Their unity in the face of certain destruction was not just a matter of survival. They fought because they had something to prove. They fought because they believed in their right to exist, to live, and to defend their people. The X-Terri, for all their advanced technology and military prowess, had missed one crucial thing. They had underestimated the heart of humanity. As the diplomat turned to look out the large windows of the command center, he saw the night sky lit up by the spectacle of war. The X-Terri ships were beginning to break formation, retreating into the stars as they reeled from the intensity of humanity's response. The diplomat could hear the whispered awe in the room. These humans, this species, had fought a battle against an overwhelming force and had not only survived but had forced their enemy to retreat. It was a victory that would echo throughout the galaxy. But it wasn't just the outcome that impressed the diplomat. It was the manner in which the humans fought. They weren't the strongest species in the galaxy. They didn't have the most advanced weapons or the most powerful fleets. But they had something no one else had, their resolve. And that, as the diplomat was learning firsthand, was something that could not be defeated. "We've taken down their flagship," an officer announced with awe, breaking the silence in the room. "It's over, General. The X-Terri fleet is retreating." Harris stood there for a moment, allowing the words to sink in. It was over. The unimaginable had happened. Humanity had not only survived, but had won. And the message had been clear. No one, no empire, no force in the galaxy would ever again look at Earth as anything less than a formidable power. The diplomat turned to Harris, his eyes wide with respect. I never thought I'd see the day," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Harris gave a brief nod. "We're not just a small planet anymore. We're a force to be reckoned with." The diplomat glanced back at the screens. The retreating X-Terri ships were now little more than dots against the backdrop of the stars. Humanity had repelled them. And now the galaxy knew the truth. Earth was no longer a target. It was a threat. For the first time since arriving on Earth, the diplomat realized that the humans weren't just playing a part in this universe. They were shaping it. The X-Terri had made a critical error in thinking that humanity was weak. But now, the universe would know differently. This was no longer just a fight for survival. This was a declaration of strength, and the galaxy would feel the reverberations of this battle for generations to come. The room began to buzz with activity as the officers coordinated the aftermath of the battle. The retreating X-Terri ships were being tracked, and strategies for future defense were already being discussed. General Harris, ever the professional, was already turning his attention to the next step. But the diplomat couldn't tear his gaze away from the view outside. The victory was immense, but it was more than just a military win. It was a testament to humanity's resilience, to their ability to rise when faced with impossible odds. The diplomat felt a pang of respect and admiration for the humans. He had thought them naive, unprepared for the harsh realities of the galaxy. But now, as he stood in this room full of people who had just defied an overwhelming force and emerged victorious, he realized how wrong he had been. Humanity was not to be underestimated, and the X-Terri had learned it the hard way. For the first time in his career, the diplomat found himself questioning everything he had been taught about the galaxy. The balance of power was shifting, and humanity was at the center of it. The galaxy had long been divided into those who ruled and those who were ruled. But now, it seemed, Earth was no longer just a part of the system. It was becoming a force that would reshape the entire galaxy. The diplomat looked back at General Harris. "What happens next?" he asked, his voice thick with awe. Harris met his gaze with a quiet, steely determination. "We rebuild, we prepare, and we make sure everyone knows that Earth is not a planet to be conquered. We are here to stay, and we will make sure the galaxy understands that, no matter the cost." The diplomat nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The X-Terry would return, and other threats would emerge. But humanity had proven something that day. They were not afraid. They would fight for their home, for their people, and for their place in the galaxy. And with that thought, the diplomat knew one thing for sure: the galaxy would never be the same again. The calm that followed the battle was eerie, like the world had taken a breath and held it. But that breath didn't last long. In the aftermath of the confrontation, General Harris found himself in the briefing room, surrounded by his senior officers and advisors. The tension was palpable. The X-Terry might have retreated for now, but their defeat wasn't something they'd just accept quietly. No, it would only be a matter of time before they returned with a vengeance. "We've bought ourselves some time," Harris said, standing before the gathered officers. "But we need to be prepared for what comes next. This isn't over." The diplomat stood at the back of the room, quietly observing. He had been granted full access to the discussions, as his role was now pivotal in understanding just how Earth could maintain its newfound position. He had thought his role as an observer would be more detached, but now, watching humanity's leaders plan the future, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of respect. There was a depth to their strategy, a sense of purpose that was rarely seen in other species. "We've damaged their fleet, but we haven't crippled it," one of the officers said, breaking the silence. "The X-Terry will regroup. They'll come back stronger." Harris nodded gravely. "That's why we need to keep pushing. We can't sit back and wait for them to make their move. We need to make sure that the message we sent today isn't lost on anyone else. Humanity isn't going to back down." The diplomat found himself intrigued. He had assumed, based on his observations, that humanity would be content with surviving. But now he was hearing something different. The humans weren't just surviving. They were positioning themselves to take command of the galaxy. The X-Terry might have been the first to feel the brunt of humanity's resolve, but they wouldn't be the last. "We should strike first," another officer suggested. "We can hit their supply lines, weaken them before they can reassemble their forces." Harris mulled over the suggestion, his eyes narrowing as he weighed the risks. A preemptive strike could work, but it also opens us up to retaliation. We've made our point, but we need to make sure we don't overextend ourselves. The diplomat raised an eyebrow. "You're planning to strike first. Is that not a bit aggressive?" Harris turned to him, meeting his gaze with a steady look. "In this galaxy, if you don't make your presence known, you'll be wiped out. The X-Terry are a reminder of that." The diplomat hesitated before responding, his voice quieter now. "But is aggression truly the answer? You've shown them your strength. Perhaps it would be wiser to continue the negotiations. There could still be a way to avoid further bloodshed." Harris let out a low, almost bitter chuckle. "Do you think the X-Terry care about peace? They're a warrior species. They'll never accept that humanity is capable of standing up to them. We've only delayed the inevitable." The diplomat was silent, absorbing the weight of Harris's words. It was clear that this was a new chapter for humanity, one where survival no longer meant just protecting what was theirs. It meant securing their place in a galaxy that had long overlooked them. But in the diplomat's mind, that meant walking a dangerous line. There was no room for weakness in this new reality. Once humanity had proven they were capable of defending themselves, they now had to prove they could fight for something greater: control. General Harris's voice brought him back to the present. "We'll launch reconnaissance missions, identify where the X-Terry are rebuilding their forces. We'll hit them before they're ready. It's time to show the galaxy that Earth is no longer a planet to be underestimated." The diplomat, deep in thought, struggled to reconcile the humanity he had come to know with the path they were now on. They had faced extinction and come out victorious. But now, their victory was morphing into something else entirely: the beginning of a new order. Humanity was no longer a species at the mercy of others. They were becoming the merciless. As Harris turned to the map of their solar system, the diplomat couldn't help but think about the question that had lingered in his mind since his arrival. Why were humans so armed? The ex-Terry had wondered the same thing. They had questioned the necessity of Earth's military strength, baffled by the abundance of weapons and technology. They had underestimated humanity's resolve. But now, as the diplomat observed the humans in this room, he realized that the question wasn't just about the weapons they carried. It was about the mindset behind them. The ex-Terry had attacked thinking that humanity would cower, would plead for peace, but humanity had answered with fire, fury, and a burning determination that said loud and clear, "We will never bow down again." The diplomat wasn't sure what his next steps would be. He had once come to Earth to witness the fall of a species, but now he was watching the rise of an empire. The future was no longer a place where Earth was a weak, isolated planet. The humans had proven they could stand on their own. And soon, they would be standing on equal footing with the most powerful species in the galaxy. It was a thought that sent shivers down his spine. Outside, the stars shone brightly, indifferent to the conflict that was unfolding within the human heart. But the diplomat now understood something. The galaxy would soon understand Earth's power. It would soon understand why humans were so armed. It wasn't just for defense. It was because humanity had learned that in this universe, strength was the only currency that mattered. And now, humanity was ready to collect its due. The ex-Terry might have retreated for now, but they were far from finished. And neither were the humans. The tension in the command center had escalated to a level that could almost be physically felt. Every officer, every soldier, every analyst stood at their stations, their faces lit by the glow of their screens, eyes locked on the unfolding situation. The ex-Terry had retreated, yes, but that was not the end of the story. The galaxy was watching, and Earth's next move would either confirm their place in the cosmos or send them back into the shadows of insignificance. General Harris stood at the forefront, his posture stiff but determined, surveying the map before him. "General, we've identified their reinforcements. They're gathering just outside the Orc cloud," one of the officers reported, breaking the heavy silence. "They're preparing for a counterattack. We can expect them within the next 2 hours." Harris's lips pressed into a thin line. The ex-Terry had underestimated them once, and now they would make sure the aliens never made the same mistake again. Humanity wasn't just going to defend their world anymore. They were going to make a statement that would echo across the stars. The diplomat, who had been quietly observing the situation unfold, felt a sense of foreboding stir inside him. He had never imagined Earth would be capable of such a transformation. He had seen countless civilizations crumble. But this was different. The humans were no longer the weak, vulnerable species they had been before. They had become something else, something the galaxy had never seen before. They weren't merely defending their home anymore. They were asserting their place among the stars. "Prepare for a full assault," Harris ordered, his voice cold and measured. "We hit them hard, and we hit them fast. Make sure they understand that Earth is no longer a target." The diplomat's heart raced as the orders rang out through the command center. There was a coldness to Harris's voice now, an intensity that spoke of something more than just military strategy. It spoke of a desire for retribution, a message that would shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. The diplomat stepped forward, unable to keep silent any longer. "General, this is a dangerous move. We've already won. Why not use this moment to negotiate, to show them that we're not just a force to be feared, but a species willing to find peace?" Harris's eyes flicked to him, a flicker of something unreadable passing over his features. "You're wrong," he said, his voice low, but firm. "The ex-Terry don't want peace. They never did. They think they can just steamroll over us, treat us like we're nothing. I'm not letting that happen. We need to show the galaxy that we are not just survivors. We are conquerors." The diplomat felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors of humanity's drive, of their relentless will to survive. But now, standing here, Watching the planning unfold, he realized how far this would go. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about dominance. Harris turned to the screen, his gaze narrowing. Get the fleet ready. We're not just going to push the X-Terry back. We're going to drive them to the ends of the galaxy if we have to. We will make sure they never think about attacking Earth again. The diplomat's mind raced. He had seen the X-Terry's technology, their ruthless nature. To go after them, to hunt them down, it would be a massive risk. But even as that thought crossed his mind, he couldn't ignore the truth. Harris was right. The galaxy was about power. Strength was the only thing that earned respect. And if humanity wanted to be more than a footnote in galactic history, they would have to fight for it. All ships, stand by for deployment, came the announcement over the intercom. The order was clear, and the wheels of war began to turn. The diplomat watched as the human fleet, once a symbol of fear and hesitation, now moved with a deadly precision. Every ship, every soldier, every fighter was ready. This was more than just a battle. This was Earth's declaration of war on complacency. The galaxy had been wrong to think of humanity as weak, to assume that they would simply bow down when faced with the unknown. The X-Terry had learned that lesson in blood, and now it was time for the rest of the galaxy to understand. In the briefing room, Harris stood before the holographic map, his finger tracing the routes the fleet would take. "We hit them where it hurts," he said, his voice unwavering. "We don't give them a chance to regroup. Every second counts. We'll push them out of the Orc cloud and into the deep reaches of space. They'll know that Earth will not tolerate invasion." The diplomat was struck by the gravity of the plan. Harris wasn't just talking about a victory. He was talking about shaping the future. The galaxy would now know that Earth was not just a planet among countless others. Earth was a force to be reckoned with, and if the X-Terry didn't respect that, they would be made to. As the final preparations were made, the diplomat's thoughts swirled with uncertainty. Was this really the right move? Could humanity, a species that had once been on the brink of extinction, really carry out such a bold campaign without plunging the galaxy into chaos? But as he looked at the faces of the officers, the determination burning in their eyes, he knew the answer. The humans had already made up their minds. This wasn't just a war, it was a transformation. And there was no turning back now. The fleet began its march into space, the engines of their ships humming with power, and the diplomat felt a deep sense of awe. He had come to Earth to observe their downfall, to witness the end of a species that was hopelessly outmatched. But now, as he watched their ships leave Earth's atmosphere and head into the unknown, he realized the truth. Humanity was no longer the prey. They had become the predators. And the X-Terry were just the first to learn that lesson. The galaxy would soon know that Earth had not just survived, it had awakened. As the diplomat stood in the command center, watching the human fleet set out on its mission, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been forever altered. They were no longer a weak, insignificant species. They were now a power to be feared, a force that would shape the future in ways the galaxy had never seen before. And the X-Terry, for all their might, would never forget the day they learned what it meant to provoke Earth.